All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I am Katie Stasa, the Senior Digital Media Strategist at Community Solutions, and it's an honor to welcome you here to this discussion about a Built for Zero community's recent undertaking, the Veterans Village. This initiative exemplifies what's possible when communities unite to tackle one of our nation's most urgent challenges, ensuring every veteran has a safe and stable place to call home. The Veterans Village is more than just a housing development. It's a community-driven solution focused on providing veterans with the stability, support, and sense of belonging that they deserve. Today's conversation is particularly exciting because we're not only discussing successes in Minnesota, we're looking at a model that communities across the country can adopt to accelerate an end to veteran homelessness. And joining me today are some of the phenomenal partners who have each played a critical role in bringing this vision to life. So I have Pastor Tom Jenkins from Mount Calvary Church, Sophia Humphreys, Executive Director from the Housing First Minnesota Foundation, Joe Jablonski, Vice President of Land Development at Lennar Builders, and John Lovald, Chief Operating Officer at the Minnesota Assistance Council to Veterans, also known as MACV. And together we'll explore how each of these partnerships has made the Veterans Village possible, and more importantly, how communities everywhere can use this model to drive change. Thank you all for being here, and let's dive in. So I'd love to start with kind of spotlighting the Veterans Village and how it came to light, what it is, and explain it for someone who is just hearing about this model for the first time. So John, did you want to give us a brief overview of this project and explain what it is?
Thanks, Katie. I'd love to. Yeah, the Veteran Village idea, I think, has been something that we've been interested in doing with the Lennar organization and Housing First Foundation. We've done a lot of scattered site house construction over the past 7 years, and the idea of being able to do something with everybody in one location, make it a much easier build process, as well as a much easier ability to provide supportive services to individuals who are all located in one spot. But the Veteran Village as an idea is for naught if there's not a place to actually be able to build one. And we had been looking for years for a larger property, not for Pastor Tom Jenkins and their church's desire to do something meaningful with a piece of property located next to their church, we wouldn't be talking here today. So it's everybody's idea, but it's how it all came together that brought us here today.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So I'm curious to know what sort of unique challenges that veterans face in accessing stable housing and how this Veterans Village specifically addresses those.
So MACV, our mission is ending veteran homelessness, and we do that a number of different ways. For the majority of the veterans that we serve, we were able to place them with a traditional landlord. We help 1,600 veterans over each year. MACV's own property inventory, we typically use that to help the veterans with the fewest housing options. Veterans who have previously experienced homelessness and are really just putting their lives back together. So it's important for us to have our own properties that we're able to create space for those veterans with the fewest housing options. And then, in that ability comes with all the wraparound services of everything else that MACV is able to provide. And again, the ability to provide it to, let's say, 20 veterans or 20 veterans and their families all in one location really simplifies the process of being able to maintain those touch points in assisting people, not just find stable housing, but maintain their stable housing.
Excellent. Yeah. So I'm curious about MACV's No Barrier Release program and how that works and why it is crucial for veterans who may face housing instability.
Well, the no barrier, that's a great reference point. Thank you for calling that out, because when you say something like the veterans with the fewest housing options, many of us are familiar that means that these veterans probably have barriers. And barriers can look like a number of different things: previous evictions, mental health concerns, poor credit, legal issues in the past, and your standard landlord may not, see that as a viable option when they could rent to somebody who has no barriers. And therefore, when we say we set our housing aside to be no barrier housing, it's very specifically to veterans with the fewest options. I can say that our success is based on being able to create that spot, and they can live with us for as long as they want to, and are successful. And then if they want to move on to another thing, we're able to show a successful rental history with MACV, and then make meaningful referrals to other landlords in the area should they want to move up and move into another area.
Excellent. So thanks for giving that kind of brief overview of how the Veterans Village is helping to fill those gaps for veterans in Minnesota. I'd like to take a step back a little bit and get a better understanding of, when did this project start being talked about by all these partners, and like when was it finally completed? Are veterans actually moving into this place now, and how's that looking right now?
Well, the conversation, I think, about doing a village has existed for a better part of a year, or closer to 2 years, with the three organizations: Housing First Minnesota Foundation, Lennar, and MACV. The conversation really became viable, and when the Mount Calvary Church decided they wanted to do something with the property that was adjacent to the church, and they reached out to us, and honestly, that is the best of all scenarios you could possibly hope for, because for us as these three organizations, even though we're well respected and everything, for us to be looking for property and then purchase property and then move into a neighborhood, and we're not known within that neighborhood, there could be a lot of anxiety there. But because Mount Calvary reached out to us through the county and other agencies, wanting to do something to create affordable housing, and they wanted to create affordable housing specifically for veterans because they had listened to their congregation and their neighbors. So for them to reach out to us and say, "Hey, we would like you to be our neighbors," that makes a lot of the hurdles that we have to overcome to even get a project like this off the ground. That's a great starting point. That's a great foundation for us to be able to do that. To the question of, is anybody moving in here yet? No, not yet. We are on numerous iterations of what the units are going to look like. And that's because we also have to be good partners with the city of Eagan here in Minnesota and follow within their guidelines. So we've had everything from 30 units on a plot, what it would look like, and down below 20 to settling on what we believe are going to be 20 units on this property. So we and the other individuals on here will be in front of the city planning council later this month, and then we will be in front of the city council the first part of December. All of those approvals get signed off, and the great news is that we have the funding ready to go. We have the builders excited to start digging, and we have a system in place to make all this happen for all the parties involved. So we believe we could have people moving in potentially the first or second quarter of 2025.
That's awesome. I'm excited to continue to watch how this journey unfolds for you all. And in the spirit of kind of reversing my flow of questions, I'd love, before we move into the Q&A, just to get an understanding of MACV's role in solving veteran homelessness in general, and what your role specifically is within that organization, John.
Sure. Well, I am John Lowald, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the Minnesota Assistance Council for Veterans. I've been with the organization for 7 years. MACV as an organization has existed for over 30 years with a statewide mission of ending veteran homelessness. For those who are watching, who might be located in another state, another city, and throughout the country, one of the benefits of being the statewide organization is that we're not competing for grants with other organizations as it pertains to helping veterans. So SSVF, HVRP. I know I'm using acronyms, but if you're watching, you probably are familiar with these acronyms. We are operating within all of the state and federal grants as the one organization nonprofit partner. My role within the organization is to ensure that we are adding properties where we need to add properties, that our staffing is where it needs to be in order to provide the services that are out there. Our organization grew significantly in the past 3 to 5 years, and that has been based on individual organizations, the state government, the federal government seeing what we're doing and then asking us to do more. So those who can do and those who can do more. It really is the case here for us, but our ability to do more has always been based on our partnerships with other organizations, state, for-profit, churches, anywhere that people want to be involved in the partnership of helping veterans, we're working with them. I think that answers the question. I do a significant amount of outward facing for the organization, but inward facing and ensuring that everybody has what they need to do their job.
Yeah, and that's no easy task. So I'm sure that keeps you quite busy, especially this time of year. I know that we just recognized Veterans Day too. So thank you all for the work that you are doing in Minnesota, and sharing these insights so other communities can hopefully replicate them as well. So now that we have a bit of an understanding on MACV's role and Veterans Village, I'd like to start the Q&A panel for all of our guests here and do a round robin of questions. And then this is a reminder for everyone joining us on LinkedIn and Facebook. Again, thank you for being here, but please drop any questions that you have for our panelists, and we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. So we'd love to hear your questions, and we'll see if we can answer them. All right, so I'm going to pose my first question to Sophia. Well, first, I'd love to hear about you, your organization, and your role. And then also, what role has Housing First Minnesota Foundation played in making the Veterans Village a reality? And what's your biggest learning from the partnership? So a few questions all wrapped up in one, but you have the floor, Sophia.
Yes. Hi, I'm Sophia Humphreys. I'm the executive director of the Housing First Minnesota Foundation. And a little bit about the organization. The Housing First Minnesota Foundation is part of and is the charitable arm of the Housing First Minnesota Association. And what we are is an association for anyone within the building industry in the state of Minnesota. To join in. And then as the charitable arm, we act in getting involved in wonderful projects like this Veterans Village. And obviously since 2017, we've been partnering with MACV and Lennar to bring and build housing for our veterans experiencing homelessness in Minnesota. So the entire purpose of Housing First Minnesota Foundation is to build dignified housing in the pursuit of ending homelessness. So that's what we do. We partner with different organizations to make this happen, with our MACV and Lennar partnership being one of our largest. So to answer your question, what's the role we've played in making Veteran Village a reality? I think the biggest part that we have played is really aiding in this collaborative effort between the three organizations. Being that we are the charitable arm of the home building industry in Minnesota, we've been able to really partner with Lennar, one of the largest builders in Minnesota, and then a number of their subcontractors and other members that are part of our association, to really engage this industry that is incredibly generous and find a mission like, the support that we're providing for MACV to get behind a cause that's really going to make a lasting impact. And that's what I think made us so excited about the possibility of building this Veteran Village when it first came to light. The other thing we kind of do, we really like to put this generosity into action. I'd say we kind of work, being that we are the voice of the home building industry. They're such a generous group of people, and this is one way that we can really showcase everything that we can do when we all work together. In terms of what we've learned from this experience. I think there's a lot. We've been at it for a while, but I think the biggest thing that probably I've learned is just as we're perfecting this model, it really is tapping into the generosity and unity of the three partners in order to get things done. And I'd like to say, like, we're kind of developing this blueprint for making a long-term impact with Veteran Village.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, at Community Solutions Built for Zero, we have kind of like a 5-pillar philosophy for how to reduce homelessness. Of course, you have to iterate and try different tasks, but one of the big key themes is always collaboration. So it's awesome to see that in action with y'all working to find affordable housing solutions with wraparound services through collaboration. It's so hard to do, but sometimes it's the only way to make these projects so successful. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
My next question is for Joe. So I'd love to hear about your role at Lennar Builders and how they've, taken on this partnership role to help build affordable housing for veterans in Minnesota. And then I'd also love to hear kind of what are some of the unique design or construction approaches Lennar has implemented to help make this village inclusive and supportive for veterans.
Sure, thank you. Good morning. I'm Joe Jablonski, Vice President of Land Development at Lennar, Minnesota Division. We are a national home builder, one of the largest home builders, not only in the nation, but also in Minnesota. Over the last 18 years, we have been the largest builder in Minnesota. And I think that allows us the opportunity to be part of partnerships such as these. Between MACV and Housing First, we get to play a really important and unique and interesting role for us because we get to take our industry expertise. We build things, we develop land, we purchase things, and we get to put that and through our associates use our expertise in this industry to really help push these projects and communities along. We have built 13 new builds, and we're working on our 14th for MACV, brand new houses, which we have turnkeyed to them. And as John mentioned, this is a great opportunity to bring more of that into one location. So we get to not only work with the trade partners. Sophia mentioned that a little bit, that our industry is very unique in the fact that they are very generous and are very supportive of veterans because many of them have veterans on their staff. We do here at Lennar as well, and it is really a great partnership that allows people to really be engaged. We do these things on the Lennar side on a daily basis. We're used to standing in front of city councils. We're used to reviewing and pulling building permits. So that the partnership for us and related to MACV, we try to take them out of those things because we are good at it. We know how to do it. And, we try to take those things and just make them as smooth, and so that when we get to the end, everyone is proud of the community that's built, the units that are built, and we turn over something to them that is fantastic. And in this case, it'll be something the city of Eagan can be proud of, MACV can be proud of, Mount Calvary Church can be proud of, and Lennar and Minnesota Housing First Foundation can all be proud of as well. So that's kind of Lennar's role. Specifically, my role is, I get to be the glue piece between the city and between the process, making sure that our entitlements behind the scenes are going smoothly, working collaboratively with city staff and city councils, planning commissions, and those things to recognize the importance of the partnership. Really, the city of Eagan becomes a partner in this as well because they ultimately have to approve it. And while we have a limited number of requests with this, we have to figure out how to balance some of the design criteria that are typical and what makes sense for a community build like this. I think that answers that part of the question.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, it's fascinating to hear it from the building side, and how you also got like some voices of veterans to provide some input into this housing as well. It's really neat to hear that you included those voices. So thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Next question is for Pastor Tom Jenkins. So Mount Calvary Church has been instrumental in rallying community support, just in general. Churches are a pillar of uniting the community. So I'm curious to hear how this church has fostered community engagement in the Veterans Village project. How did you all get involved in it? Can you tell us a bit about the community support that your church does? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I've been the lead pastor here for about 12 years now, and personally been involved in county commissions on ending homelessness. So part of the function of our church being involved in this conversation has been my interest in sort of pushing them. Communities are pillars for building networks and taking care of community solutions, but there have to be leaders willing to step in and sort of guide people and push people and pull people sometimes. This congregation's had a long history of interaction with the local community. We were the first kindergarten south of the metro here when this part of the metro was first developed. So, that was back in the 1960s. This congregation started the largest food shelf in Dakota County in our basement that now serves thousands of people a month, and it's its own nonprofit. So some of it's just in the DNA of the congregation. We had first offered this property to Dakota County to build a 24-hour shelter because we don't have an emergency shelter in our county that we really need. We did get a whole bunch of feedback from our neighbors. One of the things that's bipartisan in our country is NIMBYism. But because we had a long relationship with both the city of Eagan and with our neighbors and had a lot of direct communication and had some feedback sessions from our neighbors, one of the things that we got a list of 7 things that the neighborhood would be interested in. And one of them was to do, the quote was to do something for the veterans. And I had already met John and Joe in April of that year. So when it became clear that the emergency shelter wasn't going to work, I think what excited people in our congregation and the neighborhood in general was that we know that the percentage of folks experiencing homelessness is already contains a ton of veterans. And so it was a way to sort of make an end around the feedback against doing something for homeless folks. And at the same time, the permanent nature of this housing was exciting for us. And I think also exciting for the neighborhood, because in this way we can, John did a good job of talking about how we get to choose our neighbors. And so for us as a congregation, it's not about proselytizing folks or trying to get membership in the congregation, but rather it continues the history of this church being a good community resource, which I think when faith communities are doing their best work, they definitely lean into helping the needs that the community has. And in this case, it gives us a chance to be, beyond the village being built. We're hoping to partner with the county and with MACV in the future in the Veterans Village to provide space for any kind of programming that's necessary with larger spaces. So for us, it's really a desire to, enter into a relationship that continues for some time. So it's been a long journey, but it has a lot to do with, again, being engaged. We're a community or a neighborhood church. And so being engaged over decades. And then, our people, I think people in general want to do something that makes them feel good, and helping others is sort of the best thing we can do. So this is a perfect opportunity for us.
Yeah, thank you for giving me that background. I like that you talked about, first, the challenge of NIMBYism, because that does exist. Second, I loved that the way that you worked with the parish at Mount Calvary Church is getting them bought into this project, which is so important for the success of any sort of housing project or service for veterans or people experiencing homelessness, is making sure the community feels like this is something that they have a stake in and they want to support. That will help with the longevity for sure. So it's great to hear that you worked with your parish to get people excited about this project. I'm excited to see what y'all can do with it.
Thank you.
Next question is for John. So in leading MACV's efforts, what have been some of the biggest challenges or hurdles that you faced with this Veterans Village project? And how have you and your team and even the partners in this room worked to overcome them?
Well, I think thanks for the question. The biggest challenge has always been, what can we do in the space that we have, and that has presented itself in many different ways in different cities that we've done this. Joe mentioned we've done 14 homes already, and that included Minneapolis, St. Paul, North St. Paul, Bloomington, Maplewood, and in every one of those areas, the rules for what we can build are different. The biggest challenge, which will seem a little bit ironic, maybe obtuse, is that the demand or the requirement of a city to have covered parking, or the requirement for storage, and certainly those rules were created decades ago, and maybe they're not necessarily as up to date. But that's not to say it's all bad. In the cities of St. Paul and the city of Minneapolis, they changed their restrictions on accessory dwelling units, ADUs. First, they said people could have them, but then they said that the owner of the home had to live in one of the two units. Well, that didn't match our mission, and then they lifted that restriction. So that was great. That's an example of a rule that existed, them being nimble and changing it. I think that because rules are established and there for so long, that we sometimes have to challenge them. And that is what, in my opinion, I would say that Joe would agree with me that that's been our biggest challenge, because certainly when you're working with a builder like Lennar, they, as you mentioned, they know what they're doing. They do this day in, day out, and they know how to get these plans in and meet all the requirements. So it's never been a struggle for us as an organization to bring the energy, and thanks to Housing First Foundation Minnesota, the funds and the community, with Mount Calvary. So there's always been the energy to do, but then how do we fit into the rules and the regulations, or how do we challenge the rules and regulations? Anecdotally, I would just say, not trying to make this too long, but 15% of MACV owned property residents, 15% of them have an automobile. Of our clients that reside in MACV housing, 90% of them are at 30% AMI or lower, which means they're not necessarily affording a vehicle. So the good news is we've always been able to find properties near public transportation. That has not been a struggle. So it's a factor, but it has not been an obstacle for us.
That is fascinating. That is not what I would have expected to be the biggest challenge or hurdle, but that makes a lot of sense because there's so many policies and regulations that go along with building and housing that, I'm a comms professional. I don't think about those things hardly ever. So, and probably people in, as the COO of MACV, you're not constantly thinking of those either. So it's great to have a partner like Lennar that is so, knows these rules inside and out. So just another, +1 to partnerships. Next question is for Sophia. So in your view, how can other organizations kind of replicate this model to address veteran homelessness in their communities? I'm hoping that, after this session, some people can have some ideas of how they can replicate this success, and what have been your key takeaways.
Yeah. I know I've been contacted multiple times. I know John has been contacted multiple times. This is something that people are looking to replicate. And when I'm contacted, one of the biggest things that I say, just because we are the charitable arm of the Home Building Association in Minnesota, many states have one, if not multiple, associations for those in the construction industry. And it's an incredibly generous group of people. They want to get involved. This is a tangible thing that they can come and help with. So to have nonprofit organizations work with local construction associations is really sometimes an untapped resource that can help get construction projects done. And then also, Joe already alluded to it, a lot of veterans work in the construction industry. And so it also is a great industry to gather support in this specific area. So that's what I think that's kind of what my advice for replicating is, work with people that want to help and go for it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sophia. So the next question that I have is for Joe. As the one person on this panel that does work at a for-profit company, I'm curious of how, partnering with these organizations on this panel helps align with Lennar's broader mission or community goals. So I'd love to hear about like your charitable arm and why Lennar aligns themselves with projects like these.
Yeah, thank you for the question. In 1989, Lennar formed the Lennar Foundation, which is a nonprofit center that allows divisions throughout the company to go out and pick their charitable foundations or different organizations that they would like to support. We refer to them as our focused acts of caring. And all throughout the country, our many divisions have different ones. Our Minnesota division has elected to partner with MACV as our focused acts of caring. And, through the number of different builds that we've done, it just really is, it makes sense for us again, because we get the opportunity to provide our industry expertise to help solve homelessness and homelessness for veterans, which is even, an outstanding, even better. And the fact that so many of our suppliers, trade partners, they all get so excited about these projects and really want to step up and participate in them. And it just is a really good fit for our industry. And to be able to lead projects like this is just a fantastic partnership with all the organizations involved. And we're very fortunate to be able to have a foundation that supports so many different things. And here we do MACV, but other places that's through any sort of foundations for youth, for hospitals, for those kind of things. So, it's nice to be able to give back, but it's even better to be able to use our expertise. Our associates love getting involved. It's energizing for them and to take what they do on a day-to-day basis, but apply it to be able to, really do some good in the community is tremendous, and we're really proud of it.
Thank you. Yeah, that aligns with exactly what Tom said before, is that people love to give back. So it's present whether, you're working for a nonprofit, part of a faith-based organization or whatever, people love giving back. So glad to see that shown up and that your specific skill set can make a real impact as well. So the next question is for Tom. We know that faith-based organizations play a huge role in assisting people experiencing homelessness. It's been that way for decades and decades. So I'm curious to hear what you would say to other faith-based organizations about the role that they can play in local housing solutions for vulnerable groups like veterans.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think our greatest asset, and context is always important. We're in a relatively desirable, we're in one of the more desirable suburbs in the Twin Cities. And a lot of congregations have property. Our greatest asset is the land that we have. Most of the time, I feel like our lands are underutilized. There's also the feeling we fight within the congregation that the one thing you can't ever create more of is land. And so you hang on to that as an investment opportunity. But I feel it's critical for faith communities to look at the problems in their current context and to be willing to be brave and actually step into trying to find solutions for problems that their neighbors now are actually dealing with. So for us to be able to leverage all of the relationships, for me to be able to leveraged 12 years worth of personal relationships with these folks, with people that are looking to do something good in the world. We all know as individuals, we have very little control over some of these bigger issues that we have, but as a collective, we're not a large congregation. We have about 500 folks here, and yet 500 people with a common vision of doing something for their neighbors can actually make a pretty big impact. And in this case, we're right next to a city park. Egan has 65 city parks. We happen to be right next to one. We're on a bus line. We're, by the Mall of America, all that kind of stuff. We have a bus line that can take these veterans right to the VA hospital that's across the river from us. Some of it's looking at our location and desiring all of these things that I raised my family here in Egan also, and my kids go to these great schools. So it's also tapping into that desire to share all of the resources that we have in this place. And I think encouraging other faith communities and leaders to think more in those terms rather than trying to. I'm convinced people don't need our theology. They need sort of the practical application of that. And so in this case, our neighbors don't need, theological lessons. They need us to actually put into practice our deeply held convictions. And in this case, it's taking care of the most vulnerable among us. So.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, it's a beautiful way to say that actions truly speak louder than words. So thank you for those insights. And I can also concur that the bus line is great. I was just in Minneapolis for the learning session, the Built for Zero learning session, and I did hop on the bus. Really good bus system in the Twin Cities. All right, the next question is for John. I know I've kind of posed this question to a few other people on this panel, but I'd love to hear your perspective of how can people replicate this model nationwide? Do you have any insights from the MACV perspective?
Yeah, to be able to apply this, across the country, it really is all about the collaboration. At any time we've ever been asked about how are we able to make this happen, it's always answered with you need more than one partner. Any one organization by itself trying to do this financially, I think it's impossible. It just without having all the different pieces of what everybody else does well, you really get bogged down in, well, we really want to do this, but we're not a developer, or we've got the land, but we don't have the funding, right? And it's like, if you can't pull those pieces together, the ability to do this is, I would say, it's insurmountable, without all of the different partnerships and how they might look. And that to the point that came up earlier, which is, are you aware of building associations in your area? Who is your largest builder? And have you contacted them? I know that the Lennar Foundation that Joe is speaking about has witnessed what we're doing here in Minnesota, and they're so interested in it. They're so excited about it that they have been reaching out to other areas across the country and asked our organization to help connect their local Lennar groups with other nonprofits. So we can connect two dots, and then if we could pull in a third dot, and then however that might work, it is absolutely collaboration that will make it possible, but not just possible, feasible. Because the first time we ever talked about doing these homes, it was like, I'm not a developer. I don't understand. And when I explain to other builders, when they say, well, how does Lennar do this for you? And I say, this is like a turnkey operation. They submit the plans, they build the home, they hand us the keys at the end of it. And oh, by the way, they're not doing it with ever the intent that they're going to make money off of this house, right? A lot of other builders might see an idea like this and go, oh, I'd like to get in on that. But if they don't have the capacity to be able to do that, knowing they're not going to make any money off it, they're only going to get that great feeling that Joe was talking about, that their staff feels about they build all these big communities, and they're impacting all those families, but they're also impacting people who could not, without these homes, live in a brand new home, and they're making that happen, and they're doing that without making a profit.
Absolutely. Yeah, it all does come back to collaboration and doing what's best for the community. All right. I'm starting to see some questions roll in, so keep popping those in the chat as you have them, and we'll get to them in about 9 minutes or so. But I do have a few more questions for the panelists before we transition to audience Q&A. The next one is for Sophia. I want to hear, why it's important to focus on what matters by prioritizing essential amenities to veterans, and how does this influence resource allocation?
Yeah. So at the Housing First Minnesota Foundation, our organizational mission is to provide dignified housing in the pursuit of ending homelessness. And I think the key word in that is dignified. So these homes, the Housing for Heroes homes, the Veteran Village that Lennar is building as part of our partnership, are 1000% dignified. They are absolutely beautiful new homes that anyone would love to live in. And I think before anyone can heal, they have to feel safe, and you have to get them housing first. And this is a basic human right, obviously a clear essential amenity. And this is what we've, as our organization and MACV and others, this is what we're putting all of our resources into, is trying to build this basic right and build these houses.
Yes, thank you for saying that. That message is so important, and I love hearing it multiple times a day. All right, so our next question is for Joe. What insights can you share about overcoming potential barriers to developing affordable housing for veterans, especially in urban areas?
Thank you. It's difficult. It really does take the right pieces to fall into place. First, you need to find some land that is viable and in the correct area that will support this type of community. And that is challenging. We all know that costs are going up. It's very expensive to build a home, regardless of what you do to it. But what we have to do is really tap into the collaborative efforts of all the different people on board here, having the church and Mount Calvary support in the fact that they acknowledge this is an important community. This is an important piece to what their mission is. Sometimes you can find other locations that may have similar support, but if they don't have a willing contributor and someone so important in the collaboration as the church is as well, it can be a real struggle. And some of the things we've done with the buildings themselves, as John mentioned, garages were something that were important to the city of Eagan. When we started this community planning, we had designed it for the community to have no garage spaces, just on-street parking or very limited parking. And working with the city of Eagan, it was pretty clear that they wanted this to be to fit in with the rest of the neighborhoods and the rest of the community, and didn't want it to stand out as something that was significantly different than the rest of the community and the city itself. And through that, and just by the collaboration again with the city being part of this collaborative effort, recognizing that maybe we can do some that have garages and we can meet the need that the city wants in that regard on some of the units. Some of them, let's leave them as is and hope that they are willing to support that. But it also gave us the opportunity to create some different type of units that will allow for families in there as well. Some of them are 3 bedrooms. Others, the majority of them are only 1, but that was something that was also important, and making sure that they are, while not 100% handicap ADA compliant, they're handicap accessible, and the fact that they're zero entry at the doorways. All the hallways and doorways are being designed for wheelchair accessibility. The showers are zero entry showers. So it really is some of that thoughtful planning, and the affordability component is always an issue and always a concern. And it really takes, again, some of the fundraising, some of the collaborative efforts and the efforts and donations and things from trade partners, time, labor, just because they are so excited to be part of these that they're willing to step up and do that. And that's what helps really drive the affordability, so that when we do turn it over to MACV, we're turning it over, as John said, turnkey. There's no mortgage, there's no underlying financing on them. So they can then turn around and rent them or house people in them at an affordable rate. And they can manage that better than if they had to manage debt financing and pay off mortgages and things like that. So that's really the important component here is making sure when it's all said and done that MACV has the ability to serve the people that they need most.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, because making sure that it's accessible for anyone, no matter which situation or mobility that they have, that's very important for a housing structure for veterans experiencing homelessness or exiting homelessness. And also the fact that y'all were thoughtful in planning, like you said, a family unit, some single units, but also considering that some veterans have families and would like to live with them. So thank you for calling those out. The next question, we're going to have a couple minutes for this answer and then transition to some of the Q&A. But this question's for Tom. How does a community-led approach, like this project, deepen the impact of initiatives aimed at ending or reducing homelessness?
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate giving a preacher a 2-minute deadline for an answer. I will say that John, Joe, and Sophia are really good at not selling, but teaching other people about the mission that they have. And I think for us, it's extended our understanding of what community is to include builders that build the homes that folks live in, and other nonprofits that are trying to do the same work. I would say for us and for the Cedar Grove neighborhood, part of what I think the opportunity is that there could be greater integration of our new neighbors into the overall life of Eagan, of the Burnsville Eagan area of our community. Gives us a chance to provide a greater measure of hospitality to new neighbors, and to continue to be open and engaged with whatever needs pop up as we sort of live into this new relationship with our neighbors. And so I think that those things aren't possible if you don't have all of the groundwork laid beforehand. So I think all of the relationships with our neighbors and single family dwellings and multi-unit buildings across the street, it just gives us a chance to help be the linchpin for making sure these new folks are welcomed and integrated into the larger life of our community, because it benefits all of us for them to be welcomed and part of it. And, quite frankly, for our people, it gives them a sense of, wow, look what I helped to make happen. I mean, it really just is a feather in the cap for a lot of people to say, I was part of making this happen, even by just casting a yes vote to the idea.
Absolutely. And, just ensuring that all of our neighbors have a home, because that's what they really are. They're our neighbors. And we look out for our neighbors. So thank you. I will ask the question from the chat, the Q&A. Again, if there are any others, please drop them in. But this one is related to fundraising. So I'm actually going to pull this QR code up because this might answer some of it. But the question is, I'd love to hear more about next steps related to fundraising and how people can get involved in supporting this project from a financial standpoint. Does anyone from the panel want to take on this question?
I could jump in on this one first, and then I think Sophia probably has some comments to share as well. Currently, for our organization specifically, I'm sure for a number of other nonprofits across the country, this is This is the prime time of fundraising at the end of the year. And we're very focused on telling the story to assist in fundraising in order to make this project not just viable to build, but then to support ongoing. We have a relationship with one of the local news stations. It's a CBS affiliate, WCCO, and each year for the past 6 years, they've done a campaign with us called Home for the Holidays, and it essentially each week they tell a story of a MACV client or of a MACV success story. Sometimes it's client based, sometimes it's project based, and they tell those stories and then they share the opportunity, QR codes, a dial in, text to donate, a lot of different ways. And I think it's important to note this, that as an organization, this is not something that MACV pays for. We don't have an advertising budget to be partnered with a news agency. I think if it's advice for another organization, it's that your ability to tell your story is your ability to raise money for it. And if you shy away from telling these stories, then you're missing that opportunity. Our ability and willingness to tell our stories with this local news affiliate, which is respected and trusted by numerous residents in Minnesota, it provides us credibility because they're telling our stories. But they're telling our stories because they find that these stories are worthy of being told. They're not. This isn't, again, it's not a contractual relationship. They find what we're doing here as an organization of all these groups very compelling, and that they want to let their audience get involved in any way they can, so they can have that feeling of I helped, like Tom said, with a yes vote, or with a donation of a financial donation, a donation of time, a donation of materials. There's just so many ways that people can get involved, and we always just want to meet our donors where they're at, not ask them to do something that they don't normally do, but to ask them to do what they already do and fit it into our puzzle. So we have that campaign. I know that Sophia and her fundraising team are also leaning forward into 2025 with some other areas as well.
Yeah. Thanks, John. And I think he did a great job summing up. MACV does a great job with their storytelling and are very well known locally here, which helps us in getting the word out and getting people to support both of our organizations. But moving into 2025, there's going to be a number of different fundraising events people can get involved in. Obviously follow us, both MACV and Housing First Minnesota Foundation, on social media, so you can stay in tune with what's happening with the project. And then at any point, John alluded to, financial donations, material donations, time donations. There's need for everything. So there'll be a lot launching into 2025 for people to get involved and give back and be a part of this project if they'd like to.
Awesome. Thank you, Sophia. And that more or less takes us to the end of this session. I had so many more questions that I wanted to ask you all, but there were so many great insights that we ran out of time. So I'll have to table those until next time I'm in Minneapolis. But I just really appreciate the time, the perspectives, and the insight that each one of you brought. They were so different and valuable. We will have a recording of this session up and available on YouTube, so you can rewatch it or share it with your community. And we'll also have a fun recap on our social media and our blog at Community Solutions, community.solutions. So look out for that. But again, thank you for everyone. And just another shout out to the Veterans Village. It's truly like a beacon of hope and a model for what's possible in communities when collaboration comes from all sectors. And I hope that more cities and organizations can replicate this model or make it work for their community and their environment. Truly, by uniting across these sectors and pooling strengths and our knowledge, you can make something really wonderful, as we've seen. So I encourage you to, scan this QR code. It will take you to the Housing First Minnesota Foundation page for the Veterans Village. It will show you a little bit more about this project, ways that you can get involved, probably also how to contact them if you want to hear more insights. So just thanks again, everyone, for your time and commitment, and have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.